The emergency alarms screamed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council's central command station, their piercing wails echoing off walls that hadn't heard such urgent warnings in over 300,000 years. Admiral Zexathara's four eyes widened in disbelief as she stared at the massive holographic display before her, watching as hundreds of unknown signatures materialized at the edge of their monitored space. The council chamber erupted into chaos as representatives from dozens of species began chattering in their native tongues, creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and electromagnetic pulses that threatened to overwhelm the translation systems. Some delegates had never even heard the ancient stories, while others felt their blood freeze as they recognized the implications of what they were witnessing. Dr. Velnari, the Arctilian chief historian, pushed through the crowd with her tentacles quivering in barely controlled terror. Her people were among the few who still maintained the old records, the forbidden archives that detailed the events of 800,000 years ago. She had spent her entire career studying those dark chapters of galactic history, never believing she would witness their sequel. The ships that hung motionless in the void defied every principle of known physics and engineering. They were massive beyond comprehension, each one easily the size of a small moon, yet they moved with the grace of living creatures. Their hulls seemed to shimmer and shift, as if they existed partially outside normal spacetime. No energy signatures registered on their sensors, no heat blooms, no gravitational distortions that should accompany vessels of such enormous mass. Chancellor Morduk, the ancient Vorthok who had led the council for the past 50,000 years, felt his confidence crumble as he studied the readings. His species had been present during the original Exile, though he had been merely a junior diplomat then. The memories passed down through Vorthok genetic consciousness told him exactly what they were facing, and the knowledge filled him with a dread he had never experienced in his millennia of existence. The communication systems crackled to life, and a voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, though it carried undertones and harmonics that no living species had heard for eons. The voice was calm, measured, and carried an authority that seemed to resonate through the very fabric of space itself. Greetings, Galactic Council. We are the descendants of those you once called humanity. We have returned from our long journey, and we wish to discuss the terms of our reinstatement to galactic society. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background hum of the station's life support systems seemed muted, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Several smaller species representatives had already fled the chamber, their survival instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. Admiral Zexathara's military training kicked in, though her voice trembled slightly as she activated the response channels. Unknown vessels, you are in violation of council space. Identify yourselves properly and state your intentions. The response came immediately, and this time it was accompanied by a data stream that caused every computer system in the facility to momentarily freeze. The information that flooded their networks contained technological specifications, star charts, and scientific data that was centuries ahead of their most advanced research. It was a casual demonstration of capabilities that made their entire civilization's achievements seem primitive by comparison. We are the Terran Collective, Admiral Zexathara. We know who you are, where you came from, and every decision your species has made in the past 500,000 years. We have been watching, learning, and preparing. Our intentions are simple. We wish to reclaim our rightful place among the stars and to correct certain historical injustices. Dr. Velnari stepped forward, her academic curiosity overcoming her fear. The humans were exiled for violating the fundamental laws of galactic civilization. They were deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable to coexist with peaceful species. The council voted unanimously for their banishment. A new voice joined the transmission, this one carrying a subtle hint of amusement that sent chills down the spines of every being present. Dr. Velnari of the Arctilian Historical Archive. We are familiar with your work. Your people maintain excellent records, though they tend to be somewhat selective in their interpretation of events. Yes, we were exiled. We were cast out because we refused to accept limitations, because we dared to push boundaries that others considered sacred. The holographic displays around the chamber began showing images from Earth's past, scenes of technological marvels and scientific breakthroughs that the Council had feared would destabilize galactic civilization. Humans had been advancing too quickly, developing technologies that other species took millennia to achieve, sometimes discovering principles that challenged the very foundations of established science. We were young then, the voice continued, impulsive and perhaps naive about galactic politics. But we learned. We spent 800,000 years exploring the spaces between galaxies, visiting realms that exist beyond your current understanding of reality. We encountered civilizations that make your council look like children playing with toys. We learned from beings that transcended physical existence itself. Chancellor Morduke finally found his voice, though it cracked with age and fear. What do you want from us? The exile was legal under galactic law. The council acted within its authority to protect civilized space. The response carried a weight that seemed to press down on every being in the chamber. What we want, Chancellor, is quite simple. We want recognition. We want reparations for the theft of our homeworld after our departure. We want justice for the species you eliminated while we were gone, the ones who spoke in our favor during the exile proceedings. But most importantly, we want you to understand that the galaxy has changed. We have changed, and things will never again be as they were. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside, the human fleet remained motionless, waiting with the patience of beings who had measured time in geological epochs. The greatest powers in the galaxy suddenly felt very small and very vulnerable, faced with the return of the one species they had hoped never to see again. 3 days had passed since the human fleet's arrival, and the Galactic Council found itself paralyzed by indecision and fear. Emergency sessions had been called continuously, but each meeting devolved into chaos as species after species demanded different responses. Some wanted immediate military action, others proposed diplomatic negotiations, while a growing number simply wanted to flee to the furthest reaches of the galaxy. Dr. Velnari had barely slept since the humans announced their return. Her research teams worked frantically through the archived records, trying to piece together a complete picture of what had really happened 800 millennia ago. The official histories told a sanitized version of events, but the classified documents revealed a far more complex and troubling truth. The Arctilian historian's discovery in the deepest vaults of the archive sent shockwaves through the council leadership. Hidden beneath layers of bureaucratic classifications and deliberate omissions, she found the real reason for humanity's exile. It wasn't just their rapid technological advancement or their refusal to accept limitations. The council had been terrified by something far more fundamental about human nature. In the secured briefing room reserved for the council's inner circle, Dr. Velnari presented her findings to a gathering of the galaxy's most powerful beings. Her tentacles moved nervously as she activated the ancient holographic records, documents that had been sealed for hundreds of thousands of years. Esteemed council members, she began, her voice steady despite her fear. The official records state that humanity was exiled for aggressive expansion and violation of the peaceful coexistence protocols. However, the classified files tell a different story entirely. The hologram displayed star charts from the human era, showing the rapid spread of human colonies across previously unexplored sectors. But these weren't typical colony worlds. Each planet had been transformed in ways that defied conventional terraforming techniques, altered on a fundamental level that suggested capabilities far beyond what the Council had publicly acknowledged. Admiral Zexithara studied the data with growing unease. These modifications, they're impossible. No species has ever demonstrated the ability to alter planetary geology and atmospheres to this extent. Not without destroying the existing ecosystems. That's precisely the point, Dr. Velnari replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. Humanity wasn't just advancing technologically. They were evolving. Each generation was demonstrably more capable than the last, not just culturally or scientifically, but biologically. They were becoming something beyond what we understood as possible for a carbon-based species. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Evolution was supposed to be a slow process, taking millions of years to produce significant changes. But humans had been demonstrating measurable improvements in intelligence, physical capabilities, and technological intuition within mere centuries. Chancellor Morduke's ancient memories stirred, recalling conversations from the original Exile proceedings. The Consciousness Acceleration Project, he said slowly. There were rumors that humans had discovered how to enhance their own neural development, to compress evolutionary processes into manageable timeframes. Not rumors, Dr. Velnari confirmed, bringing up another classified file. They called it the Transcendence Initiative. By the time of their exile, The average human child was demonstrating cognitive abilities that surpassed our greatest scientific minds. They were solving mathematical theorems that our supercomputers couldn't process, intuiting physical laws that we hadn't even discovered yet. The security feeds from the original Exile showed footage that had been suppressed for political reasons. Humans defending their right to exist and develop as they chose, demonstrating technologies during the proceedings that seemed to work through principles beyond current scientific understanding. Weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and most terrifying of all, evidence that they had begun to manipulate time itself. The Council didn't exile them because they were dangerous to our civilizations, Dr. Velnari continued, her voice heavy with the weight of revelation. We exiled them because we were afraid they would make us obsolete. In another few thousand years, they would have surpassed us so completely that our entire concept of galactic civilization would have become meaningless. Fleet Commander Rathmos of the Hegemony Defense Force had remained silent throughout the briefing, but now he spoke with the grim certainty of a career military officer. If they were advancing that rapidly 800,000 years ago, what have they become now? What did they learn during their exile that we can't even comprehend? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Every being in the room was calculating the same terrifying mathematics. If humans had been evolving and advancing for 800 millennia, without any of the social or political constraints that had limited other species, they might as well be gods by now. Dr. Velnari activated the final classified document, one that had been sealed by the highest levels of Council authority. There's something else. After the humans left, we didn't just exile them. We systematically eliminated every species that had supported their cause, every civilization that had argued for their right to develop freely. 17 different species, all of them completely destroyed over the following millennia. The horror of that revelation struck the room like a physical blow. The Galactic Council, the supposed guardian of peace and justice, had committed genocide on a massive scale to cover up their fears and maintain their grip on power. They know, Chancellor Morduke said quietly. When they mentioned species that spoke in their favor during the exile proceedings, they were telling us they know about the purges. They've been watching us for all these centuries, seeing what we've become. Admiral Zexathara's four eyes reflected a growing panic. If they've been watching, they know our military capabilities, our weaknesses, our political structures. They know everything about us while we know nothing about them except that they're impossibly advanced. As if summoned by their fears, the communication system activated once again. The human voice that had spoken 3 days ago returned, but this time it carried an undercurrent of something that might have been pity. Chancellor Morduke, Admiral Zexathara, Dr. Velnari, and the rest of the Council leadership. We know you've been reviewing the classified records. We know you've discovered the truth about our exile and what followed. We want you to understand that we harbor no personal animosity toward the current generation of Council species. You are not responsible for the sins of your ancestors. The pause that followed was filled with the kind of tension that precedes inevitable catastrophe. However, justice must still be served. Tomorrow we will present our terms for reintegration into galactic society. These terms are non-negotiable. You may accept them and retain some measure of autonomy, or you may reject them and face the consequences of your predecessors' choices. We will give you exactly 24 hours to decide the future of your civilizations. The transmission ended, leaving the Council leadership alone with the weight of 800,000 years of hidden guilt, and the knowledge that their time as the dominant force in the galaxy was about to come to an end. The 24-hour deadline arrived with the inevitability of a cosmic event. Throughout the galaxy, defense fleets had been mobilized, ancient alliances activated, and emergency protocols implemented. Yet even as military commanders prepared for what might be the greatest conflict in galactic history, they knew their efforts were likely futile. The human fleet remained motionless at the edge of Council space, neither advancing nor retreating, simply waiting with the patience of beings who measured time in epochs. Chancellor Morduke stood before the assembled Council, his ancient frame trembling not from age but from the weight of the decision before them. Representatives from over 300 species filled the grand chamber, their varied forms creating a tapestry of biological diversity that had taken millions of years to evolve. All of them now faced potential extinction because of choices made long before most of their civilizations had even achieved spaceflight. Esteemed delegates, the Chancellor began, his voice carrying across the chamber through translators that converted his words into hundreds of different communication methods. We have reviewed the historical records. We have consulted with our military leaders and our greatest scientific minds. The consensus is clear. We cannot match the technological capabilities demonstrated by the returning human fleet. A wave of fearful chittering, electromagnetic static, and subsonic rumbles swept through the assembly. Many species had hoped that 800,000 years of technological development, by the combined civilizations of the galaxy, might have closed the gap. The Chancellor's words shattered those desperate hopes. Admiral Zexithera stepped forward, her 4 eyes reflecting the weight of military defeat before any battle had been fought. Our analysis indicates that a single human vessel possesses more destructive capability than our entire combined fleet. Their ships appear to exist partially outside normal space-time, making conventional weapons useless. Our best estimates suggest they could eliminate our entire military infrastructure within hours if they chose to do so. Before the assembly could fully process this devastating assessment, every screen and holographic display in the chamber activated simultaneously. The familiar human voice spoke, but this time it was accompanied by a visual presence that sent shockwaves through the gathered delegates. The figure that appeared was unmistakably human in basic form, but evolved beyond anything the Council had imagined. Tall and graceful, with features that seemed to shift subtly as if existing in multiple dimensions at once. The being radiated an aura of power that was both beautiful and terrifying. Its eyes held the depth of cosmic understanding, and when it spoke, reality itself seemed to resonate with its words. Greetings, Galactic Council. I am Ambassador Keiko Tanaka-Chen, speaking for the Terran Collective. We understand that our return has caused considerable distress among your civilizations. This was not our intention, but it was inevitable given the circumstances of our departure. The ambassador's image gestured, and suddenly the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing space around them in perfect detail. The human fleet became visible in all its impossible glory, ships that defied every principle of known engineering hanging in the void like sleeping titans. Before we discuss terms, we believe a demonstration is necessary to establish the current balance of power. Please observe. One of the human vessels, a relatively small craft barely the size of a city, detached from the main fleet and moved toward a nearby star system. The Council's sensors tracked its progress as it approached a barren world that had been used for military testing for millennia. The planet was protected by some of the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy, shields and barriers that could theoretically withstand direct stellar bombardment. The human ship took position near the planet and began to emit a barely detectable energy field. What followed challenged every understanding of physics that the Council's scientists had developed over millions of years of research. The planet didn't explode or disintegrate. Instead, it began to change. The very structure of matter started to shift and reorganize itself at the molecular level. Mountains flowed like water, oceans evaporated and reformed as crystalline structures, and the planetary core rearranged itself into geometric patterns of impossible complexity. We are restructuring the matter of this world according to principles you have not yet discovered, Ambassador Tanaka-Chen explained calmly. This process requires manipulation of quantum states across multiple dimensions simultaneously. We are essentially rewriting the fundamental forces that hold atoms together, then rebuilding them according to new parameters. Dr. Velnari watched in horrified fascination as her instruments registered energy readings that should have been impossible. The quantum signature, it's as if they're editing reality itself like a text document. Within minutes, the barren test planet had been transformed into something that resembled a living jewel, its surface covered in crystalline structures that pulsed with their own internal light. The defensive systems hadn't been destroyed. They had been integrated into the new planetary structure, becoming part of a defensive network far more sophisticated than anything the Council had imagined possible. This is a minor demonstration of applied dimensional physics, the ambassador continued. We have learned to work with the fundamental forces that underlie reality itself. Matter, energy, space, and time are all malleable concepts when you understand their true nature. The ship returned to the fleet, leaving behind a planet that now served as a monument to human capabilities. Every military strategist in the Council realized immediately that conventional warfare was meaningless against beings who could reshape reality at will. Now, Ambassador Tanaka-Chen said, her tone becoming more formal. Let us discuss the terms of our reintegration. First, the Galactic Council will acknowledge that the exile of humanity was an illegal act motivated by fear and prejudice. Second, reparations will be paid for the destruction of our homeworld and the genocide of the 17 species who supported our cause. The list continued, each term more shocking than the last. Humanity demanded representation proportional to their technological capabilities, which would effectively give them control of the Council. They wanted unrestricted access to all galactic resources and territories. Most significantly, they demanded the establishment of evolutionary zones where species could develop without the artificial limitations imposed by Council regulations. These terms are designed to create a new galactic order, the ambassador explained, one based on merit and capability rather than fear and stagnation. Species that wish to grow and evolve will be encouraged and assisted. Those that prefer to remain as they are will be protected and preserved, but no longer will advanced civilizations be held back by the fears of the less developed. Chancellor Morduk found his voice, though it trembled with the weight of his words. And if we refuse these terms? The ambassador's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Then we will implement them ourselves. The difference is that cooperation will allow you to retain some degree of self-governance. Resistance will result in direct administration by the collective until your species mature enough to participate responsibly in galactic affairs. The implications were clear. Humanity wasn't asking for permission. They were offering the illusion of choice. After 800,000 years of exile, they had returned not as suppliants seeking readmission, but as the galaxy's new rulers. The only question remaining was whether that transition would be peaceful or forced. You have 6 hours to reach a decision, Ambassador Tanaka Chen concluded. Use that time wisely. The age of human exile is over. The age of human ascendancy has begun. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence, surrounded by the transparent walls that showed them the human fleet, waiting patiently for their answer. The greatest powers in the galaxy had just learned what it felt like to be utterly powerless. The Galactic Council had never experienced anything like the chaos that erupted in the hours following humanity's ultimatum. What had been a unified governing body for over 1,000,000 years suddenly fractured into dozens of competing factions, each species desperately trying to secure their own survival in the face of an utterly changed galaxy. The Vorthak hegemony, despite Chancellor Morduk's leadership position, was among the first to break ranks. Their ancient memories of the original exile carried genetic knowledge of human capabilities that younger species lacked. Ambassador Kethavor of the hegemony stood before an emergency session and announced his people's intention to accept human terms unconditionally. The Vorthak have survived for millions of years by recognizing superior force when we encounter it, he declared, his speech causing outrage among the military-focused species. We remember what humans were capable of before their exile. What they have become now is beyond our ability to resist or even comprehend. Admiral Zexathera's response was immediate and heated. You're talking about surrender without firing a single shot. The combined military might of 300 civilizations should count for something. We've had 800,000 years to advance our own technologies. Dr. Velnari accessed her historical databases, projecting comparative data that showed the technological progression of galactic civilization since the human exile. The results were sobering. While individual species had made steady advances, the overall rate of innovation had actually decreased significantly after humanity's departure. The data suggests that human presence in the galaxy had been driving technological advancement for all species, she explained, to the increasingly agitated assembly. Their rapid development forced everyone else to innovate faster just to keep up. After they left, our collective progress slowed to a fraction of its previous rate. This revelation struck at the heart of galactic pride. The great civilizations had always believed that their technological achievements were the result of their own superior intelligence and culture. The possibility that they had been dependent on human innovation for their own advancement was almost too humiliating to accept. The Crystalline Confederacy, the alliance of silicon-based species known for their logical approach to problems, presented their own analysis through their representative, a being of living crystal whose thoughts manifested as light patterns. Within its translucent body, logic dictates that resistance is futile, the Confederacy speaker, communicated through modulated electromagnetic pulses. The demonstration of planetary reconstruction shows capabilities beyond our theoretical understanding. Military engagement would result in complete annihilation of our forces with minimal effort on their part. But not all species were ready to accept defeat so easily. The Savage Rim Coalition, representing dozens of warrior cultures from the galaxy's outer territories, had built their entire civilization around the concept of honorable combat. Their representative, General Thokmar of the Bloodclaw tribes, slammed his armored fist against the speaker's podium with enough force to crack the reinforced crystalline surface. "Honor demands that we fight, regardless of the odds," he roared. His words translated into a subsonic battle cry that resonated through the chamber. Better to die in glorious battle than to live as slaves to returned oppressors. The military faction found unexpected support from some of the galaxy's most ancient species, the Ethereal Collective, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form millions of years ago, materialized a spokesperson within the chamber. The shimmering energy construct spoke with a voice like distant thunder. "In our eons of existence, we have seen many species rise and fall. The humans may have advanced beyond our current understanding, but they are still bound by the fundamental laws of reality. Even gods can be challenged if one is willing to pay the price." This sparked a heated debate about the true extent of human capabilities. Some species argued that the planetary demonstration was an elaborate illusion, designed to intimidate them into submission. Others maintained that even if the humans' power was real, their small numbers meant they couldn't effectively control an entire galaxy of trillions of beings. Dr. Velnari found herself in the uncomfortable position of having to share even more classified information. According to the sealed records, human population growth was accelerating exponentially before their exile. If they maintained even a fraction of that growth rate, their current numbers could be in the hundreds of billions or even trillions. The debate raged for hours as species after species declared their positions. The scientific communities largely favored negotiation, recognizing that human technological advancement could benefit everyone. The military factions demanded resistance on principle. The economic powers calculated the potential profits and losses of either path. Meanwhile, smaller and less influential species began making their own desperate arrangements. Secret communications channels buzzed with activity as planetary governments attempted to contact the human fleet directly, offering individual surrender in exchange for protection from whatever was coming. Chancellor Morduke watched the dissolution of galactic unity with the heartbreak of someone who had devoted his entire existence to maintaining peace and cooperation among the stars. The council he had led for 50,000 years was tearing itself apart in mere hours. Centuries of carefully balanced diplomacy crumbling under the weight of existential fear. As the arguments grew more heated, and several species representatives began issuing threats against each other, the chamber's communication systems activated once again. Ambassador Tanaka-Chen's image appeared, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood figures that were clearly human in origin, but evolved far beyond anything the council had imagined possible. "We have been monitoring your discussions," the ambassador said, her tone carrying a note of disappointment. "We had hoped that 800,000 years of civilization would have taught you the value of unity in the face of change. Instead, we see the same fear and division that led to our exile." One of the figures behind her stepped forward, and reality seemed to bend slightly around their presence. When they spoke, their words carried harmonics that resonated through dimensions the council's scientists couldn't even detect. "I am Coordinator Marcus Webb Singh, speaking for the Terran Military Collective. Some of you have been debating the possibility of armed resistance. We want to ensure you understand exactly what that would entail." The transparent walls of the chamber showed new images from space. A human vessel, no larger than a personal transport, approached one of the galaxy's most heavily fortified military installations. The Nexus Station was a marvel of defensive engineering, protected by energy shields that could withstand the explosion of stars and weapon systems, capable of sterilizing entire solar systems. The human ship didn't attack the station. Instead, it simply unmade it. One moment the massive fortress existed in normal space-time, and the next it was gone. Not destroyed, but simply erased from reality, as if it had never been built. No explosion, no debris, no energy release. Just absolute complete negation of existence. That was our response to the concept of resistance. Coordinator Websing explained calmly. We have moved beyond destroying matter and energy. We can now edit the timeline itself, removing objects and events from the flow of causality. The station didn't just cease to exist. It never existed at all. The implications of temporal manipulation on that scale struck the assembly like a cosmic thunderbolt. If humans could edit the timeline, they could erase entire species from history, make civilizations never happen, or alter the past to ensure their own victory in any conflict. Your time is running out, Ambassador Tanaka-Chen announced. In 2 hours we will implement our terms regardless of your decision. The only choice remaining is whether you wish to be part of the new Galactic Order as partners, or as subjects under direct administration. As the transmission ended, the fractured council faced the most important decision in galactic history. The age of their dominance was over, but how that new age would unfold still depended on choices they were rapidly running out of time to make. With less than 2 hours remaining until the human deadline, the Galactic Council chamber had transformed into something resembling a war zone of competing ideologies. Emergency barricades had been erected to separate the various factions that had formed, and security forces struggled to maintain order as centuries-old alliances crumbled in real time. Dr. Velnari worked frantically at her research station, her tentacles moving across multiple data interfaces simultaneously as she tried to find any precedent in galactic history for their current situation. The archives contained records of species joining the Council, leaving the Council, even being expelled from the Council, but nothing about the return of an exiled civilization that had become functionally omnipotent. There has to be something, she muttered to herself, searching through diplomatic protocols that had been established over millions of years of interspecies relations. Some procedure, some legal framework that could guide us through this. Admiral Zexithara approached the historian station, her 4 eyes reflecting the exhaustion of someone who had spent hours trying to coordinate an impossible defense. Dr. Velnari, I need you to tell me honestly. Is there any military strategy in recorded history that could work against beings who can edit reality itself? The Arctilian historian paused in her research, her tentacles drooping with defeat. Admiral, I've studied every conflict in galactic history. Wars between species with comparable technology. Wars between advanced and primitive civilizations. Even theoretical scenarios involving time manipulation. But this, what the humans demonstrated, goes beyond warfare as we understand it. They're not just superior. They've transcended the very concepts that define military conflict. Across the chamber, Chancellor Morduk stood before a small group of elder species representatives, beings whose civilizations predated the Council itself. These ancient ones had remained silent throughout most of the crisis, but now their counsel was desperately needed. Wise ancients, the Chancellor said, using the formal address reserved for the galaxy's oldest species. Your peoples have survived cosmic events that destroyed entire stellar regions. Surely your experience offers some guidance for this unprecedented situation. The Ancient of the Void Singers, a being of crystallized dark matter that communicated through gravitational waves, responded with patterns that took several minutes to translate into meaningful language. Young Chancellor, we have witnessed the birth and death of galaxies. We have seen species rise to challenge the fundamental forces of the universe itself. The humans have not become gods. They have become something far more dangerous. They have become gardeners of reality. The implications of that statement sent ripples of unease through the gathered elders. A god might be appeased or bargained with, but a gardener would simply tend their garden according to their own vision, pruning what they deemed unnecessary and nurturing what served their purposes. Meanwhile, the military faction had retreated to a secured section of the station to make their final preparations. General Thokmar stood before a holographic display showing the deployment of the largest fleet in galactic history. Over 10 million warships from hundreds of species had assembled at strategic points throughout Council space, ready to make what they knew would likely be their final stand. Even if we cannot win, he declared to his fellow military commanders, we can show these returned humans that the galaxy will not simply roll over and accept their domination. Honor demands resistance regardless of the cost. Fleet Commander Rathmos of the Hegemony Defense Force studied the tactical displays with growing unease. General, with respect, our entire combined fleet represents perhaps 1% of the destructive capability we saw demonstrated on that test planet. We would be committing suicide without even the possibility of inflicting meaningful damage. Then we die with honor instead of living in shame, Thokmar replied, his scarred face showing no trace of doubt. Better to be remembered as warriors who stood against impossible odds than as cowards who surrendered without a fight. But even as the military prepared for their hopeless battle, other species were taking dramatically different approaches. The Economic Union had established direct communication channels with the human fleet, offering economic data and trade agreements in hopes of securing favorable treatment under the new order. The scientific collective was transmitting their research archives to the humans, hoping that their accumulated knowledge might earn them a place as junior partners in humanity's cosmic empire. Dr. Velnari made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in the most restricted archives, she found a document that predated the human exile by several thousand years. It was a scientific paper written by a joint human-Arctilian research team, proposing theoretical frameworks for faster-than-light evolution and consciousness acceleration. "Chancellor," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos of the chamber, "I found something crucial. The humans didn't develop their advanced capabilities alone during their exile. They were already collaborating with our ancestors on these technologies before they were banished." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. If humans had been working with other species on their most dangerous research, it meant that some galactic civilizations had been complicit in creating the very threat they now faced. Chancellor Morduk studied the ancient document with growing horror. This suggests that the exile wasn't just about fear of human advancement. It was about covering up collaboration that some council species found politically inconvenient. As this new information spread through the chamber, the political dynamic shifted once again. Species began examining their own historical records, looking for evidence of pre-exile cooperation with human researchers. The picture that emerged was of a galaxy where humans had been integrated into the scientific community far more deeply than the official histories suggested. With 30 minutes remaining until the deadline, Ambassador Tanaka-chan's image appeared one final time. But now she was accompanied by representatives of species that the Council hadn't seen for hundreds of thousands of years. "Delegates of the current Galactic Council," she began, "I would like you to meet your former colleagues. These are the descendants of the 17 species that were eliminated after our exile, the ones who spoke in our favor during the proceedings. The beings that appeared alongside the ambassador were clearly evolved far beyond their original forms, but genetic analysis confirmed their identities. Species that the Council had believed extinct had not only survived but thrived under human protection and guidance. When you exiled us," one of the resurrected species spoke, their words carrying harmonics of technologies the Council had never encountered. "We took our true friends with us. They have shared in our growth and advancement. They have become our partners in ways you never allowed them to be when they were part of your rigid hierarchy." The psychological impact of seeing the supposedly extinct species alive and flourishing was devastating. Not only had the Council committed genocide against innocent civilizations, but those same civilizations had survived to become part of humanity's return. "The time for debate is over," Ambassador Tanaka-chan announced. "You have 10 minutes to make your final decision. Accept our terms and join the new Galactic Order as cooperative members, or face direct administration until you learn to govern yourselves responsibly." Chancellor Morduk looked around the fractured chamber, seeing centuries of galactic unity dissolving before his eyes. Some species were already broadcasting their surrender directly to the human fleet. Others were preparing for what they knew would be a futile military response. A few were simply fleeing, hoping to escape to other galaxies before the transformation began. The greatest governing body in galactic history was about to make a choice that would define the future of countless trillions of beings. And time was running out for them to make that choice as a unified civilization, rather than as a collection of desperate, frightened survivors. The final 10 minutes of the old galactic order passed with the inexorable certainty of entropy itself. As the human deadline approached, the Galactic Council made its choice not through unified decision, but through the collapse of unity itself. 2/3 of member species formally accepted human terms in individual communications, while the remaining third either declared their intention to resist or simply went silent, their representatives fleeing to whatever remote corners of the galaxy they hoped might offer sanctuary. Chancellor Morduk stood alone at the central podium as the countdown reached 0. Around him, the great chamber that had hosted diplomatic discussions for over 1,000,000 years was nearly empty, its holographic displays showing the real-time dissolution of the greatest political entity in galactic history. I, Chancellor Morduk of the Vorthak hegemony, speaking for those representatives who remain, formally acknowledge the return of humanity to galactic affairs and accept the terms as presented, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of civilizations. May history judge us not by our failure to maintain unity, but by our wisdom in recognizing when the universe itself has changed. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Human vessels began materializing throughout council space, not through faster-than-light travel, but through what appeared to be direct manipulation of spatial coordinates. Ships that existed partially outside normal dimensions suddenly occupied the same reality as the galaxy's major population. Center's Dr. Velnari watched in fascination as a human vessel appeared directly outside the council station. Unlike their massive fleet ships, this one was elegant and beautiful, its hull seeming to flow like liquid metal while maintaining perfect structural integrity. When it docked with the station, the connection was seamless, as if the two structures had been designed specifically to join together. Ambassador, Tanaka Chen entered the council chamber, not through technological transportation but by simply walking through what had been a solid wall moments before. Her presence brought with it a sense of vast spaces and infinite possibilities that made the chamber feel simultaneously smaller and larger than it had ever been. "Thank you for your wisdom, Chancellor Morduk," she said, inclining her head in a gesture of respect that somehow managed to convey both acknowledgement of his authority and complete certainty of her own superior position. "The transition will begin immediately, but we want to assure all cooperative species that the changes will be implemented gradually and with consideration for your existing social structures." What followed was a demonstration of administrative efficiency that humbled everything the council had accomplished in millions of years of governance. Within hours, human administrative teams had established presence on every major world in council space. These weren't occupying forces but rather coordination centers where local governments could interface with the new galactic management structure. The humans had not come to rule through force, Dr. Velnari realized as she studied their methods. They had come to optimize. Every decision they made, every system they implemented, was designed to maximize the potential of each species while maintaining galactic stability. It was gardening on a cosmic scale, just as the ancient had predicted. Admiral Zexithera found herself in the surreal position of coordinating with human military advisors who demonstrated tactical capabilities that made her lifetime of training seem quaint. They didn't command her forces. Instead, they offered suggestions that improved efficiency by orders of magnitude while reducing the need for actual warfare to practically zero. "Your defensive strategies are sound for conflicts between comparable civilizations," explained Coordinator Marcus Webb-Singh as he reviewed her tactical databases. "However, they're based on scarcity thinking. When resources and energy are essentially unlimited, military strategy becomes more about preventing conflicts than winning them." The coordinator showed her defensive technologies that could protect entire star systems without requiring massive infrastructure or ongoing energy costs. Shields that existed in folded space, monitoring systems that could detect aggressive intent before it manifested as action, and most remarkably, diplomatic protocols that could resolve conflicts by addressing the underlying psychological and economic factors that caused them. Meanwhile, species that had chosen to resist discovered that their rebellion was being managed rather than crushed. The Savage Rim Coalition's massive fleet found itself unable to engage human vessels that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When they fired their weapons, the energy simply passed through empty space where sensors indicated targets should be. General Thokmar's final communication from his flagship was a grudging admission of defeat that carried more respect than resentment. "These humans fight not like conquerors but like teachers correcting unruly students. They have made our resistance meaningless without destroying our honor. Perhaps there is wisdom in their approach that our warrior traditions failed to recognize." The promised reparations began flowing immediately, but not in the form anyone expected. Rather than demanding tribute or resources, the humans began upgrading the infrastructure of every cooperative civilization. Planets that had struggled with environmental damage found their ecosystems restored overnight. Species facing genetic bottlenecks discovered that their reproductive viability had been enhanced through subtle biological adjustments that left their essential nature unchanged while eliminating hereditary diseases and limitations. Dr. Velnari was among the first to experience direct collaboration with human researchers, and the encounter transformed her understanding of what knowledge could be. The human scientists didn't just possess advanced information, they had developed entirely new methods of thinking that allowed them to process and integrate concepts across multiple dimensions of reality simultaneously. Your species has an excellent foundation for historical analysis, explained Dr. Sarah Kim Okafor, a human researcher whose presence seemed to extend beyond her physical form into realms that Arctilian senses could barely detect. But you've been limited by linear thinking about causality. Let us show you how to study history as a multidimensional phenomenon where cause and effect flow in all directions simultaneously. The educational experience was overwhelming. Dr. Velnari found herself understanding historical events not just as sequences of actions and reactions, but as complex webs of interrelated possibilities that existed across multiple timelines. The human exile itself became visible as a necessary step in galactic evolution, a temporary separation that allowed both humanity and the other species to develop in ways that would ultimately benefit everyone. As the first month of human administration passed, the changes became undeniable. Interspecies conflicts that had persisted for millennia were resolved through economic and technological solutions that addressed root causes rather than symptoms. Scientific advancement accelerated at rates not seen since the original human period. Most remarkably, species throughout the galaxy began showing signs of evolutionary acceleration, similar to what humanity had experienced before their exile. Chancellor Morduk, now serving as liaison coordinator between the old council structure and the new human administration, found himself working more efficiently than he had in centuries. The bureaucratic complexity that had characterized galactic governance was replaced by systems that seemed to anticipate problems and solve them before they manifested. The humans aren't ruling us, he realized during a conversation with Ambassador Tanaka-chen. They're upgrading us. Everything they do is designed to help each species become the best version of what they could be. That was always our intention, Chancellor, the ambassador replied with a smile that carried genuine warmth. We spent 800,000 years learning not just how to transcend our own limitations, but how to help others transcend theirs. The galaxy forced us into exile because they feared our potential. We return now to help them realize their own. The new galactic order was taking shape, not through conquest or domination, but through the patient application of capabilities so advanced that resistance was not just futile, but irrelevant. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as cosmic gardeners, ready to cultivate a garden of civilizations that could reach heights none of them had imagined possible. 1 year after the return of humanity, the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. What had once been a collection of separate civilizations bound together by necessity and fear had become an integrated network of species working toward shared goals that would have been impossible under the old council system. Dr. Velnari stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Transcendence Institute, watching as ships from hundreds of species arrived for the first Galactic Evolutionary Symposium. The institute itself was a marvel that challenged traditional concepts of architecture, existing simultaneously in normal space and several parallel dimensions, allowing researchers from radically different environments to work together in ways that had never been possible before. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Several species had initially struggled with the rapid pace of change, while others had resisted the evolutionary acceleration programs that humanity offered. But the humans had demonstrated infinite patience, working with each civilization at their own pace while ensuring that no one was left behind in the galaxy's advancement. Dr. Velnari called a familiar voice. She turned to see Dr. Sarah Kim Okafor approaching. But the human researcher's appearance had subtly changed over the past year. Where once she had seemed to exist partially in other dimensions, now she appeared to be anchored more firmly in baseline reality, as if she had learned to constrain her transcended nature to make communication with less advanced beings easier. Dr. Kim Okafor, Velnari replied. her tentacles rippling with the complex emotions that had become common since the human's return. "I've been reviewing the preliminary reports from the evolutionary acceleration trials. The results are extraordinary. Over the past year, volunteer subjects from dozens of species had participated in carefully controlled enhancement programs. Unlike the forced genetic modifications that some had feared, these were collaborative processes where individuals could choose their own path of development while receiving guidance from beings who had already traveled those paths. The results had exceeded everyone's expectations. Arctilian historians were developing the ability to perceive temporal flows directly, allowing them to study history by observing past events as they happened. Crystalline Confederacy members were learning to exist as pure information, maintaining their consciousness while traveling at the speed of light between star systems. Even the warrior species of the Savage Rim had discovered new forms of honor in becoming protectors of cosmic stability rather than simple fighters. The most remarkable aspect, Dr. Kim Okafor explained as they walked through galleries displaying the achievements of enhanced individuals, is how each species is developing along paths that reflect their essential nature while transcending their previous limitations. "We're not changing what you are. We're helping you become what you've always had the potential to be." Ambassador Tanaka-Chen materialized beside them, her form rippling slightly as she transitioned from whatever dimensional space she had been occupying. Her presence brought with it the scent of growing things and the sound of distant stellar harmonies. "Dr. Velnari, we've been hoping to speak with you about a special project," the ambassador said. "Your work on historical causality analysis has impressed our researchers. We'd like to offer you the opportunity to participate in our most advanced program." The Arctilian historian felt her respiratory systems accelerate with excitement and nervousness. "What kind of program, Ambassador?" "We call it the Chronicle Project," Dr. Kim Okafor explained. "We're developing a comprehensive record of galactic history that exists outside normal temporal flow. Participants would be able to observe and document events from multiple timeline perspectives simultaneously, creating a historical record that captures not just what happened, but all the ways things could have happened." The implications were staggering. Such a project would create the ultimate historical archive, one that could answer questions about causality and consequence that had puzzled scholars for millions of years. But it would also require the participant to develop sensory capabilities that went far beyond anything her species had ever achieved. The process would be gradual, Ambassador Tanaka-Chen assured her, and completely reversible if you decide you don't want to continue. "We've learned from our own evolutionary journey that forced advancement creates instability. All growth must be voluntary and supported." As they discussed the project, they were joined by other beings who exemplified the new galactic order. Chancellor Mordek arrived in a form that was clearly Vorthak, but enhanced with capabilities that allowed him to process information from multiple species simultaneously. Admiral Zexathara had developed tactical perception that could analyze stellar-scale conflicts across multiple dimensions of space and time. Even General Thokmar appeared, his warrior's frame now serving as the foundation for abilities that made him one of the galaxy's most effective peacekeepers. His enhanced empathic capabilities allowed him to understand the root causes of conflicts and address them before violence became necessary. "The resistance movements have largely dissolved," the general reported, his voice carrying harmonics that conveyed complex emotional states as well as factual information. "Most holdout species have realized that joining the new order doesn't mean losing their identity. If anything, it means discovering aspects of their identity they never knew existed." Dr. Velnari made her decision with the certainty that came from a year of observing human intentions in action. "I accept your offer to join the Chronicle Project, but I have one request." "Of course," Ambassador Tanaka-Chen replied. "I want to document not just what happened during humanity's exile, but what we learned from it. The fear, the mistakes, the eventual reconciliation. Future civilizations should understand how transformation is possible even after 800,000 years of separation." The ambassador's smile carried depths that seemed to encompass entire galaxies. "That's exactly why we hoped you would join us, Dr. Velnari. The most important lesson we learned during our exile is that growth never ends. We've become something our ancestors couldn't have imagined, but we're still becoming. The galaxy we're building together will evolve into something none of us can predict." As the evolutionary symposium began in earnest, representatives from across the galaxy gathered to share their experiences with transcendence and growth. Species that had once barely tolerated each other now collaborated on projects that spanned multiple star systems and operated on timescales measured in geological epochs. The humans had kept their promise. They had returned not as conquerors but as teachers, not as rulers but as gardeners. The galaxy they were cultivating together was becoming something unprecedented, a civilization that embraced change rather than fearing it, that saw diversity as strength rather than threat, and that measured success not by stability but by potential. Realized. Chancellor Morduke stood before the assembled delegates and spoke words that would be remembered as the official beginning of the transcendent age. We gather today not as separate species struggling for survival, but as gardeners of infinity, tending a galaxy where every being can grow beyond the limitations that once defined them. The exile that began in fear has ended in wisdom. The return that we dreaded has become the transformation we never dared hope for. Outside the Institute, human ships worked alongside vessels from hundreds of species, their combined efforts reshaping star systems and creating new worlds where forms of life that had never existed before could flourish. The garden of stars that humanity had envisioned was becoming reality, tended by gardeners who understood that the most beautiful gardens are those where every plant can grow according to its own nature while contributing to the beauty of the whole 800,000 years of exile had ended. The age of unlimited growth had begun, and in the vast reaches of space, new forms of consciousness stirred to life, ready to inherit a galaxy where anything was possible, for those brave enough to transcend their limitations and wise enough to help others do the same.